Welcome to another episode of Primility Primer, our morning reminder of the power of balancing pride and humility as we go about our daily lives. This is episode 16. I am your host, Jared Morris, and it is Tuesday, so we are going to have another edition of Real Talk Tuesday, which we did our first edition of Real Talk Tuesday last week, and it's really an opportunity to be real with ourselves, even with other people, about some place in our life that we want to be, some goal that we want to achieve that we aren't at yet. And maybe we're a little bit off track. And why? Really having some honest self awareness about why we aren't where we want to be and what we can do next. That's the most important part, what we can do next, that next step to get us on that track. And so, last week's Real Talk Tuesday was about me, and this week's Real Talk Tuesday is actually going to be a story that I'm going to relay that I heard this weekend. I spent this weekend at Podcast Movement in Fort Worth, Texas, and had a chance to talk with a lot of people. And one guy in particular that I met, I'll call him Stan. That's not his real name, but that's what I'll call him since I'm going to kind of be relaying a story that he told me privately, but I thought it was a good one. And I thought it was really illustrative of some of the topics that we've been discussing here. And Stan is one of the most earnest, enthusiastic people that I met at Podcast Movement. Really enjoyed the time that I got to speak with him and really enjoyed and appreciated his candor and kind of being real about himself to me. And what he talked about was a moment during the conference that really frustrated him with himself. He was being interviewed. He was being asked some questions about what made him successful. And he said that there was a certain action that he took every day, positive self-talk, we'll say. And he stated this as a big reason for his success. Yet the problem is that he didn't actually do this every day. So he was kind of putting it out there like he was doing this and kind of leading by example in this way, but he wasn't actually doing it. And I could tell that he was kind of beating himself up about essentially lying. I mean, telling an untruth. It wasn't a premeditated untruth. He got caught in the moment a little bit. And the first thing I noticed is it seemed like Stan's self-awareness, which was really a positive in this case, I thought. Obviously, it would be kind of sociopathic to say that and not feel maybe a twinge of regret or guilt about it. But that self-awareness was starting to kind of morph into self-flagellation a little bit. And that's a topic that we've discussed here on Primility Primer a few times now, that self-awareness is really a positive, understanding, especially maybe things that are negative that haven't turned out the way we want to, really being honest with ourselves about why, not blaming other people, not making up reasons that don't really exist, but really being honest about the reason why something isn't going how we want it to go. But then not allowing that to morph into really getting mad at ourselves or that kind of negative self-talk that can really be self-defeating when what we need is that next step to move in a positive direction. And it really struck me that this was a quintessential example of where Primility could really help Stan kind of bring himself back into balance and move in that next positive direction. Because it just seemed to me like in this moment, he got caught with, which we all do, with that excess pride kind of morphing into conceit a little bit. He wanted to seem bigger and maybe better than he was. He had this ideal picture of himself in his head, someone who did this every single day and who could state that and have it be true. And it just wasn't there yet. And what he really needed in that moment was the humility to recognize that, hey, I want to be this person. I'm not yet. And the best way I can actually reach other people with this is to explain it truthfully, to say, I wish I did this and I want to start doing this, but I'm not quite there yet. And instead, that pride, that vanity, that conceit really is what seeped out a little bit. And I think that's why he immediately recoiled at having done this, at having said this. And so I think this is really a moment where instead of beating himself up over it, because that's something that I think a lot of us do and don't necessarily mean to do, get caught in the moment and say something that maybe inflates us or inflates our value a little bit. And in a lot of ways, that's human nature. But certainly the better way to handle it in that moment and in future moments is really to have the humility of understanding that we're not there yet. And that relaying that and being honest about that is actually, in the long run, the best way to inflate our own value, or to not to inflate our own value, but to represent our own value in the right way, but have it still be high and something that people look at and admire. And I think I never Stan and I, actually, we got interrupted when we were talking about this. I never got a chance to fully tell him what I thought about it, but that's what I feel about it. Is, obviously Stan has this ideal in his head for what he wants to do, and that element of pride is really good. That part is good because it's going to drive him to hopefully start doing this, because he clearly wants to be someone who does this every single day, right? Who gets up, has this positive self-talk, uses that to help drive him to success during the day, and then leads by example, so that this is something that he can show other people as something they can do. And that element of pride is really good, as long as it doesn't morph into this excessive pride where he kind of gives himself credit even without having done it. So when that good element of the pride is combined with the humility to say, okay, now I've got to actually do it every day. There's no shortcut. I say that I want to do it every day. I want to be the type of person who does it every day. I want to have I want to be that person who does it every day. Now I've got to actually do it every day. And that by actually leading by example, not just this image I want to portray, but actually doing it every single day, is the best way to lead others by example. And that, of course, by doing it every day, the impact will compound and it will grow exponentially. And there's a certain humility to understanding that those little actions every day, day after day, as small as they may seem, add up to something big, even more than any single grand gesture. And so those two combined, that pride in where we want to be, with the humility to understand the work, the commitment that it will take to get there, really, I think in this case, and in a lot of cases, that's what we need in these real talk moments when we get frustrated with ourselves because we don't do something, or we're not where we want to be. That's really the way to take that next step. And the next step for Stan is simply wake up tomorrow and do it. Do it that one day. And hopefully doing it that one day leads to the momentum of doing it another day, and then another day, and then another day. And all of a sudden, in a month or in a year, when he gets asked that question again, and he's just done it back to back to back, day after day after day after day, now he can answer it truthfully, honestly, confidently, and where his aspiration matches the reality. And now when he has that moment of self-awareness, it's positive, and he can take real pride in what he's been able to do, the consistency he's been able to have, instead of immediately recoiling with kind of that negative impression that he had gotten. So that is this edition of Real Talk Tuesday. One thing I would like to do, again, my goal here with these episodes of Primility Primer is just to start the conversation, to share a story, allow us to talk about it, but then also open it up for you to share your stories too. And whether it's the comments on the blog post page, primility.com/show/016 for this one, or in the new Facebook group that we started, primility.com/Facebook, request join. I'll add you in there and we'll talk about these. We can talk about this situation specifically. You can share yours. The idea here, again, is to have this self-awareness, open up about someplace we want to be, and maybe learn from the perspectives of others, and possibly even just motivate ourselves, commit ourselves by the simple act of stating it out loud. That's really the goal of these episodes of Real Talk Tuesday. And so I hope it's something that doesn't end at 6:39 or 6:40 when we stop the recording here, but I hope it's something that continues. And obviously these episodes are out there forever. So if this episode inspires you, come to the show page, again, primility.com/show/016, come to the Facebook group, and let's talk about it. Thank you very much for watching this episode of Primility Primer. Thank you very much for listening to this episode of Primility Primer. If you're listening on the podcast, we will be back, as always, tomorrow morning at 6:30 Central Time with another brand new episode. Until then, stay cognizant of your pride and your humility. Keep them in balance as much as you can, because it truly does have an impressive, powerful, motivating, compounding impact over time when we do it. I'll talk to you tomorrow. Wrist bump.